All right. Vamos a empezar con our next speaker, Nick Greens. Interesting name, Greens, Verde, Nicolas Verde. Nick Greens began his growing career in 2002 as an apprentice grower for a hydroponics shop in San Diego, California. In 2010, Nick moved back to Chicago to start growing produce for Blue Star Produce, where he perfected his compost tea recipes and became a pioneer in organic microgreens and leafy greens. As a user of organic tea, Nick, awesome, very important. He worked for and advised many Chicago indoor farms, including Garfield Produce, Bright Farms, Windy City Greens, The Plant in Chicago, which is a very interesting facility, and then farmed here in 2014. In 2016, Nick helped design and build the Food Science Lab for Schertz High School in Chicago, based on a STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, STEM, curriculum that trains future farmers and supplies healthy food for the school cafeteria. Nick has mentored dozens of interns, and many remain working in the industry today. Please help me welcome Nick Greens.
Is this on? Is this on?
You're the man. Go for it.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Let me get this. So in 2010, in 2010, I started to work at this place called The Plant. Is anybody familiar with The Plant? First off, I want everybody to know this is not going to be a lecture. I want this to be a discussion. So if anybody has questions to stop me, please don't go ahead and let me know. I like to live my life like a dry erase board. Anytime I need to erase something in my mind, I want to be challenged, so I can go ahead and erase that. Okay, so 2010, I started to work at this facility called The Plant in Chicago. I started there as a volunteer. I did about 2.5 years doing volunteer, and about 2012, I had the non-for-profit give me a job, which is that non-for-profit's called Plant Chicago. And I started to do, basically I was just going to start a garden club, and it was just going to be for the neighborhood of the back of yards neighborhood. So then we started to grow microgreens, and how can I say this? I started to grow microgreens, and we started to deliver to Michelin star restaurants. And the reason why I chose Michelin star restaurants is because the Michelin star restaurants had the palate to tell me when my product was bad or to tell me when my product was good. I started to deliver on my bike, deliver to all these restaurants, and then after a while my business just became a little bit more when you're dealing with restaurants, the business is just up and down, right? Restaurants, there's never consistency with buying from you, it's always up and down. So I went into the consultant industry because I didn't want to hoard all the information. I wanted to share the information and grow the industry. So today we're going to be talking about regulations and how I started to build these regulations with all my experience. So in 2014, I got a job at Farmed Here. I don't know if everybody's familiar with Farmed Here. Farmed Here was one of the biggest indoor vertical farms in our nation in 2014. So in 2014, I started to develop the program there, starting off with one system, working with one Whole Foods store. A year into it, I was working with 42 Whole Foods stores. And that's how I came up with a lot of these regulations, the food safety, which is the most important part of having a program when you're growing indoors, is your food safety program. Because you don't want to be the one to call up you don't want to be the one to get the call from the Whole Foods store saying that you got to pull all your product off of the thing because there's an outbreak, which I've seen happen when I was at Farmed Here, and that is not a good thing for business. So there's a lot of ways to start off, and the way I started off is I started off first buying from Crop King. I bought one system from Crop King, and it was already a full system out of the box Crop King system. And then after a while, I wanted to start building more systems. Instead, I started to do it myself. So I started to take Crop King channels, which is a 10-inch channel, 12-foot long channel, and I started to grow in these channels using an NFT method, which is the nutrient film technique. It's actually not just a nutrient film technique, it's also like, it's a hybrid basically. It's an ebb and flow / NFT system. So we're going to be talking about indoor production and how I started to build all the food safety stuff from the indoor production. So I started growing in the basement and growing in an attic, growing in little closets. I mean, I was growing food everywhere that I could grow food. And then we started to take it to the warehouse. And when we started to take it to the warehouse is when I started to see all the diseases started to occur, a lot of the pests starting to occur, and I really wanted to figure out on how I can stop this and, you know, just to get this to stop. So here's one of the facilities. This is growing about a good 40 different microgreens in there. You can actually grow about 170 different varieties of microgreens. It can be anywhere from popcorn to pea shoots to broccoli to onions, all the brassicas. We even started to do microflowers too as well, and selling them to the chefs too. Okay, so here is a microgreen system, and this is a Crop King system that's out of the box, and this is the system that is the hybrid. So as you can see, there's pipes down the, let's see, where's that? There you go. See right there, there's pipes there. This is where all the bacteria builds up. This is where your problem lies, right? So I had to figure out on how we can stop this right here. This is a big problem. So I started to use beneficial bacteria. Is everybody familiar with beneficial bacteria? I started to use a beneficial bacteria to help me stop this. So I started to use it in every single process that I do, from the germination process to the seeding process to the cleaning process to the feeding process, and I just use it everywhere. And the thing about using beneficial bacteria is you got to look at it as these are hungry bacteria. So when you're spraying it everywhere, they're eating the food source for everything else not to exist. You have pathogens that are not going to thrive. You have the other bacteria that's not going to thrive. It's only the beneficial bacteria that's going to thrive in these systems. So the most important part that I came to was using biology to help me with my food safety program. Okay, so let's go back. All right, so when I started my microgreens at the plant, I started to grow in the windows. I started to use the light instead of using artificial light. And the reason why I did that, because it was a lot cheaper to grow this way. As you can see, we're growing wheatgrass right here, and wheatgrass is probably about a 5 to 7 day product. A lot of the other microgreens that you grow are anywhere from a 7-day to a 21-day. When I started my program, I really focused more on the shorter ones. So we were growing radish, pea shoots, and broccoli. Them were the three that I started off with. And the reason why I started off with them because the short cycle that they had on them. And the turnaround was really quick. You were able to get your money back and start putting that money into other places in your farm. And then also here's just a living wall just to show you other things that they're doing with microgreens. All right, so here you got the system on one end right here. Wait. On one end right here, you got the feeding, and on this end, you got the output. So the way the system works is you got a reservoir on the bottom, and it's feeding about 2 to 3 times a day, depending on the environment. So let me see this. So down in the reservoir, we have one pump, and what I did with this is I took one little pump, and I'm feeding 4 different systems with one little pump. And the way I did that is I started to have solenoids on each system. And the reason why I did that is because I did not want to be able to use these big pumps, because when you're using big pumps, it's starting to heat up the water, and if you're heating up the water, you're starting to cause more things to happen to your system. We go back to the food safety thing again as well. So what I do is I have a small pump. We feed each system separately, and then what I did is I took it another step further, and I started to add moisture sensors to the bottom of the pads. So now we have moisture sensors on the bottom of the pads telling me when it gets about 20% dry, the system turns on and puts it back to about 80%. So that's kind of like the sweet spot that you want when you're growing microgreens, is that 20 to 80%. That's also something that also helps you with your food safety as well. When you have that dry out period, you're not having all them pathogens, having all this food to just go ahead and do what they do. So what we started to do is I was growing in these, handling these 12-foot, these are 12-foot channels. And when you have a 12-foot piece of burlap, it's really hard to pull off this 12-foot piece of burlap. And so you have to cut it up in pieces. And we started to notice that you have to have 2 people working on one system when you're doing your harvesting. So what we did is we started to grow in 10 by 20 trays and putting the 10 by 20 trays with holes on the bottom inside the system. And when we did that, we watched our output, our man output hours go down by 60%. So we saved a lot of money by handling 10 by 20 trays as opposed to growing in these 12-foot long pieces of burlap. Okay, so we're going to be talking about, let me look on this side. I was starting to get a little confused on this side. This one's in Spanish. So we're going to be talking about growing space equipment. So there's a lot of different types of equipment out there to help you with this, from irrigation to, you know, All right, so here's one piece of equipment that is very important, is using stainless steel countertops. And once again, we go to the food safety thing. We want to definitely make sure that it's not porous, so that way none of the bacteria or anything is building up. So you definitely do not want to use wood whenever you're growing microgreens. Because you got to remember, microgreens is all about germination. So you're basically running a nursery. So if you're running a nursery, you got to make sure that this nursery is the cleanest nursery that you could think about, right? So that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with baby plants all day, and that's it. And here's the harvesting process. And another thing about the harvesting process that I use is very, very sharp knives. And the reason why we use sharp knives is because if you cut it with a dull knife, you're going to break the cells, and it's going to start breaking down really, really fast inside the packaging. And then that's just going to become another food safety issue as well. So you want to make sure when you're harvesting microgreens that you're using a sanitized, very sharp knife or scissors. Here's some examples. Here goes the scissors right here. This scissors you can take apart so you can get them sharpened. So we do have sharpeners in the growing facilities, so that way we can go ahead and sharpen the knives and the blades. Here goes a variety of different ones that I use, just because, you know, depending on if one's not sharp, one's not whatever, something's longer, something's shorter. I want to have all my equipment so I can go ahead and start harvesting things and keeping, once again, that food safety thing. We got to always remember that food safety thing. And then here you go washing it. And once again, I recommend nobody to wash their microgreens. The only reason why I put this here is because there's some people out there that would want to wash them. So instead of not washing the microgreens, I keep my grow room clean. When people grow in the grow room, they wear a face mask, they wear hair nets, they wear booties on the shoes, they wear cloths over the things. I mean, you're treating this like a very sterile facility. So if you're treating your facility like very sterile, you don't really have to worry about washing your greens. And that is very important, once again, on the man output hours. You save a lot of money if you're not washing your greens. And a way to get around it on the regulation side is just put on your packaging, must wash. So that's all you have to do, is just put on your packaging, must wash. Here's a scale for weighing up the microgreens. We do weigh up the seeds also with this scale, so you can weigh the seeds and you can weigh the microgreens. We usually sell the microgreens in this is about a 1.75 ounce container. You can also sell a 0.75 container as well, or you can also go up to an 8 ounce container, which is, if you're dealing with restaurants, you're probably selling the 1.75. If you're dealing with distributors, you're selling the 8-ounce container. Distributors want the 8-ounce container because they're dealing with all these restaurants, right? So, and another thing about growing microgreens is how fast does it get in the refrigerator from when you cut it? So this is another important thing about it. We did a lot of research with Michelin star restaurants where I would cut it, wait a while, put it in the fridge, and then I would cut it and immediately put it in the fridge, and then I started to cut it inside the walk-in cooler. And when we started to cut inside the walk-in cooler, we noticed our shelf life go up by 2 weeks. We took some microgreens and I put them in does anybody familiar with a stainless steel tiffin container? It's like a lunchbox. It's made out of stainless steel. So we go ahead and we harvest some microgreens, we put it in the stainless steel container, and we stuck it in a walk-in cooler at a Michelin star restaurant for 4 weeks. The chef went out, pulled it out of the walk-in cooler. We opened it up. The microgreens were still fresh. He used them that day on the service. So 28-day microgreens that were cut were able to still be used for service. And the reason why is because we had cut them microgreens with a very, very sharp, sterile knife inside the walk-in cooler. So if you want high shelf life on your microgreens, this is another important part to the process. All right, so here goes a 10 by 20 tray that I was talking about. 10 by 20, you can also get a 10 by 10 tray because if you're growing into 12-foot channels, you only can fit 6 10 by 20 trays. And then you got a little section for a 10 by 10 tray. So you can also use 10 by 10 trays, so you're doing half trays for your thing. I do recommend also to try to sell the trays whole and live, so that way you're not harvesting, so you don't have to worry about having a sharp knife or doing it in a walk-in cooler and stuff like that. And if you're also growing, and say you're growing microgreens, and you have a client that wants them, but then he decides that I can't get them now. Can we wait about 4 days till I get them? So the trick you can do is you can take a live tray of microgreens, put them in the walk-in cooler, and they'll slow the growth down, and now you've got about another 4 days before you harvest them or send them to the chefs. So there goes another trick that you can use to kind of just, because the crop planting when you're dealing with restaurants and distributors and CSAs, and you're dealing with all these different types of markets, and you want to spread yourself with all these markets, you got to watch out for your crop planting, because that really is the thing that take you down. Now, when you're a small facility and you only have one system, and you're like, oh my God, I figured it out, I got it down, and then you try to scale that, and you forget about them little things, this can really take out your company. I've seen companies put millions of dollars into this and just millions of dollars into this, and I'm like, wait a minute, we're not making money. Why are we putting money and money and money and money? Is a business just to raise money? No, a business is to make money. So this industry, I just don't understand it when I see these big companies raising $30 million, raising $120 million, but then there's still no plan to be making the money back. And this is the big problem for a lot of this industry and all of these people going out of business. So just please watch when you get into this business or you're getting into business with anybody else to really, really watch that part. You know, to watch on how much money's coming in and how much money's going out. So, okay, so here goes a seed. This is a company called Garfield Produce. They're in Chicago, Illinois. I've been working with them since 2017. And they are making money. They are profiting back. They are making that money back. I made them stop spending their money, and I made them start making that money. So now this is a mixture. This is a peat moss mixed with perlite, and they're growing in 10 by 10s, and they're growing popcorn shoots here, it looks like. So everybody familiar with popcorn shoots? Anybody ever hear of popcorn shoots? Any hands here? Nobody? So what a popcorn shoot is, basically it's a microgreen, but we do not grow it in the light. We grow it in the dark. So the whole time that you grow this microgreen is grown in the dark. So the whole 10 days or 11 days that you grow this microgreen, you can grow in the dark. And then another variety you can grow in the dark is pea shoots, which they're called golden peas. There's this gold there, especially if you're not using light. If you're growing these in the dark, it's a no-brainer there. Okay, so here's two different ways that you are putting the seeds on the thing. One way you're doing them on the package, but if you use the package, you can't weigh them. You don't know what you don't know how much seeds in. One area, if you look right here, this area is all crowded up. There's nothing right here. This is not the way you want it. So right here, I got the seed shakers, so that way you can put the seeds in the seed shaker and shake it evenly, so that way you get your even growth. So it's all about packing as much seeds as possible into this little 10 by 10 area and just packing it up. I got two different facilities. One facility is using 1 ounce of seeds, and one facility is using 2 ounces of seeds. And everybody asks me, but why? Why is one using the other? And the reason is because they both got different environments. If the one that's growing 1 ounce decided to grow 2 ounces, he'd get mold, mildew. Dampering would just start happening in all his trays. He can't do it because he's not fine-tuned. The one that's growing 2 ounces of seeds in one tray, he's got it pearled. He's got it fine-tuned. Everything is just perfect. It's just really, really good. And then also the trick to this too is when you're growing this, you got to also make sure that light is even. And the way you can tell that your light is not right is you get uneven growth. So if you're looking at your microgreens and you got this uneven growth, there's something wrong with your light. It's not the fertilizer, because microgreens don't really need a lot of fertilizer. I did a test with a Michelin star restaurant where we took one where we fed it water. We took another one where we fed it just regular concentrate fertilizer. And then the second one, I did microdosing, where I just used small amounts of nutrients to just have them present. And gave them to the chef, did not tell the chef which one is which. The chef tasted all three, and he picked the one that I microdosed and said, this is the one that contains the most oils, this is the one that has that flavor that I want, keep doing it this way. So now I microdose everything that I grow now. It's all about microdosing now, and I'm really, really getting into microdosing because I use a fertilizer called Nature Source. Nature Source is not like no other fertilizer in the industry. It's a 3-1-1. It's very, very low, and everybody's like, how do you get this off this thing? Well, when you're dealing with plant, because it's a plant-based fertilizer, and when you're working with plant-based fertilizers, you tend to notice that you don't need much. And your EC would be really low, and you're like, but look, your EC is like as low as I ever seen it. How are you doing this? Well, it's because it's so enriched with nutrients that you can stretch it out more. So you actually save more money by buying the most expensive fertilizer. Nature Source is very expensive, but you don't need much. So it becomes just as cheaper as growing with salt-based fertilizers. So let's get to the next slide. Okay, so here's the different ways that they're growing microgreens. Some people believe about the stacking technique. So what they do is they germinate the thing, they spray the tray, and then they stack them on top of each other. A lot of companies swear that it's getting them more weight. I have not seen the results, and all the testing that I did, I have not seen the difference. So for this, it's just about preference and space. Because you could pack a lot more right here. You're stacking them more right here, so you can pack a lot more. And right here, they're not stacking them. They're just covering the top tray. So you can use the bottom tray to cover it, or create your own germination room. So you have a separate germination room that you have, because if you're growing also the pea shoots and the popcorn shoots, you want it dark anyways. So you don't want to put this in the grow room area if you're growing them other varieties. You want to make sure you have a designated area where it's dark and it's got the humidity, so you don't even have to use covers. So everything is just dialed in. All right, so here's the different types of the trays and the seed preps. We do use spray nozzles to spray them. There's other facilities that just use regular water. They don't use biology at all, so they'll just use these regular hose things to spray them, to spray the thing. Now, once a microgreen grows and it's ready for light, you don't want to spray it no more. You're not feeding it from the top no more. There's no more top feeding no more. It's all about bottom feeding when you're growing microgreens. You don't want to damage the seedlings. The seedlings are very, very tender and fragile, so you want to bottom feed all the time. I recommend that for every varieties you're growing, is once you get to the point of them leaving the germination room, they should no longer be top feeding at all. So seed soaking. I do sterilize, we do use, we use a biological thing. Other people use bleach. Some people use hydrogen peroxide. I mean, once again, it's just your preference. I prefer using biology when I'm soaking my seeds, especially when you're doing popcorn and pea shoots. You want to grow them like you're growing sprouts. If anybody ever grown sprouts, they'll know that that's the way you want to start off. You want to soak them for about a good 10 hours. After the 10 hours, you want to drain all the water out. Keep them inside the container, closed lid, for about another 1 day or 2 days until you see the radicle pop out. As soon as you see the radicle emerge, that's when you put them on the tray. As you've seen the other tray back there, we were putting them on the tray. And this, you wouldn't use the seed shaker when you're soaking seeds. And not all seeds do you want to soak. You don't want to soak your brassicas. You don't want to soak your arugula because you're just going to have a mushy mesh. You don't want to soak basil seeds because you're also going to have a mushy mess. So not all your seeds you're going to soak. So instead of not soaking those seeds, you just put it in the spray bottle and spray them. So that's a way to sterilize the seeds that you're not soaking. The only seeds that you soak are the bigger seeds, your pea shoots, your popcorn, your chard, your sunflower shoots, which sunflower shoots are my favorite. I don't know if anybody's had a sunflower shoot here. I recommend you to try it. And if you're a wheatgrass juicer, I recommend you to start juicing sunflower instead, because sunflower contains more nutrients, you get more juice, and it's just really good for you. I have a program in Chicago where the kids are juicing sunflowers and they're selling shots of sunflower juice to the teachers. So that was one way that I interact business with the kids too, because we want to get the kids into entrepreneurship as well too. So here are some more other things. Instead of using a scale when you're weighing out your seeds, you could use measuring cups. You know, different size measuring cups to weigh it out. I also use measuring cups to weigh out my fertilizers if you're not using a scale. So not all the time do you need scales. And another thing that I like about this is they're stainless steel. We go back to the food safety thing. We want to make sure everything is stainless steel so we're keeping everything nice and clean and sterile. Okay, so here goes a little facility. Okay, so about this picture, I'm going to tell a little story really quick. When I started my farm in 2010, we went to the state to get our business license. And when we went to the state to get our business license, they sent me to another department. They're like, no, we don't know what to do with you. Go to this department. I went to this department, and they're like, no, we don't know what to do with you either. Go to that other department. So I get back to the other department that I started. They're like, nope, we don't know. Go to that other department. I must have went back to all of these departments about 8 or 9 times. And then I ended up back to the first department that I started at. And that was the one that was going to make the decision. So what they decided is to treat us like a high-end restaurant. So I got treated like a Michelin star restaurant. So my grow room had to be as clean as a Michelin star restaurant's kitchen. And we know how hard that is to get a license like that. So this is where all my regulations and all my training came from, is because nobody else is doing this. I was the first one doing this in Chicago, especially indoors. Well, the good thing about it is when I started at the plant was an old meat packing facility. So when we moved into this old meat packing facility, it was already food grade. So it wasn't hard for us to really set up a grow room and make it ready, because we had all the sinks. We had all the sinks with no hand. You can't touch, you can't turn the knobs on. You gotta have the push one. You know, we had the triple basin sinks. We had everything, the ventilation. I mean, the walls, the FRP. Is anybody familiar with FRP? It's the white walls that you see in the kitchen that you can wipe, which is, I think it's called fire retardant polymer. I think that's what it's called. So you definitely want to have that too. So I guess if anybody's really thinking of getting into this, the most important part is just find a food grade facility, start from there. because making a food grade facility from scratch is very expensive, especially if they were treating you like a high-end restaurant. So here goes a triple basin sink. Like I said, we had to meet all the regulations of a high-end restaurant. I mean, they even complained that we didn't have a hand sink. I don't know, I forgot the distance between the hand sink. It must have been like 1,000 feet. Every 1,000 feet, we had to have another hand sink. So if we had a 3,000 square foot facility, we had to have 3 hand sinks throughout the facility. Now, in Chicago, that's no longer the rules. They are treating it like a lower end restaurant now. So it got a lot easier for people to get business license in Chicago. But once again, we wanted to set the regulation high. So when they told me to do something, I took it to the next level and I set it higher. I even started teaching the inspectors on what to look for in other grow facilities. And that was actually a good thing because they never came around after that and inspect me ever again. Okay, so here goes some media storage. This is important, especially in the city, because we have rodents in the city. And yes, mice love microgreens. Let me tell you, mice and rats love microgreens, and they love microgreen seeds, and they love the medium to use the barrel. I mean, they're in heaven when it comes to this. I didn't know that rats like greens. I mean, but they do. And the way we started to deal with that is we started to do more pest control, keeping the rooms clean, just really working on that, covering our storage, everything, nice containers, keeping everything sealed. I mean, this is the most important thing. I mean, you got to treat like a hospital and just keep it super clean, because once you have it like that and you set the regulations for your company like that, oh my God, you should see how smooth things run. Things run so smooth. Like I said, the facility that I have in Chicago that's called Garfield Produce is probably the highest standard in food safety that I've ever seen in any grow room ever. And the reason why is because the woman that was in charge, there's 2 people that started the company. One was a CFO from the Chicago Tribune for 30 years, and it was his wife who was the lawyer from 1980 to the 90s for Motorola. So a lawyer and a CFO is the one that's running this facility. And when you walk into this facility, you can tell that the lawyer is the one that's in charge of the food safety program. Because everything is just, labeled, just organized. I mean, that's the way you got to keep these facilities and keep on everybody about this. So here goes another growing medium. This growing medium is made from a jute plant, which is, some people call it burlap. The difference between burlap and jute is that jute, this is not a processed, this is actual fiber that's pressed together with a glue. When you deal with burlap is processed. So they got to make burlap, and they take the jute plant and make burlap out of it and weave it, just like blankets or whatever. So there's a lot more energy going into the burlap pads and the burlap that and the hemp pads. So that's why I stick with the jute pads, because they're using raw fibers and pressing them together. And when you're using also raw fibers, you're going to have humic acid available quicker than when you're using processed fibers. So we all know what humic acid is, the building blocks of life. And when you have seeds that are starting to life, put those 2 together, you never have problems in your grow room. So there goes another one of my tricks. I use this along with my biology and feeding from the bottom, and then watching the lights. And the way you watch the lights again is look for the evenness. And if you don't got that evenness, then go complain to the guy that sold you the lights and tell him that wasn't enough. And then here you go. There goes some other grow pads. This one right here, this pad right here is a Rockwool pad. Is anybody familiar with the crest plates? You can also use crest plates, but the thing is, with Rockwool, they won't disclose on what glue they use, so we can't use this in compost. So if you're not composting it, you probably don't want to put this in your program, because there's going to be somebody to get on you on why you're not using something that you can use in the compost. Okay, here goes some of the medium and equipment. Also, when you're building a grow room, you don't need to go buy all them fancy systems that I showed you. You don't need to go buy the Crop King system. You can also grow it on a rack like this with the trays in there. So you just grow it directly in the tray, put it on here, put the lights up on top of here, and grow it in your kitchen. So not necessarily do you have to buy all these fancy equipment, spend all these thousands of dollars to figure out you don't want to do this. So the best thing to do is go small. Go small. I actually, when I was working at Crop King, I got to work with Crop King. I don't know if everybody knows who Crop King is. Crop King is a hydroponic and greenhouse manufacturer for the last almost 40 years. I got to work there for about 18 months in their research house, which was awesome working there. And what I did is I built a desktop tabletop system to put on your kitchen counter or that, because when I was a consultant, the most thing that everybody wanted to do is buy a $3,000 system, put it in their basement and play with it. I couldn't live with myself by selling these $3,000 systems knowing that they probably wouldn't even use it. So what I did is I developed this little system so that way people could spend $60 to $100 and figure out if you wanted to do this. So I think that's probably the best way if you're trying to get to learn this, you want to start a company, or maybe you just want to grow for your family too. Get a small little system, put it in your room, and you can put it anywhere you want. Even by a window, put it by a sunny window as well. You don't need to have artificial light to start practicing in your house or any of that. Okay, here goes some more wash-up stuffs. Here's Sanitate. I don't use Sanitate. Like I said, I use Biology. And we use regular just Dawn and bleach to do the cleaning. Dawn and bleach together, oh my God, it'll clean anything, especially when you're dealing with the white channels like you've seen. And if you're also growing in these white PVC channels, as soon as you take your trays off, don't let it dry up. Because if you let that dry up, it'll stain and you can never take the stains off. So when you're ever cleaning these PVC things, as soon as you take it off, you clean it while it's still wet. Easy to clean. Put your man output hours down too. Here's storage. Once again, we go back to the food safety thing with storage. We want to make sure that you store everything good because, like I said, mice and rats, they love microgreens. I was jealous because when I started my business, I couldn't afford my microgreens. I was selling them for $25 per tray. $25 per tray. Whatever the chef wanted to grow in that tray, I would grow. But he would have to pay me $25 for that tray. So here goes a basic floor plan. And this is another important part, is flow charts. And it's not just one flow chart. There's two flow charts. And the two flow charts are, you got a growing flow chart, right? One growing flow chart. So everything that's going on in the growing process, so you can figure out where all your critical points are. Where can something go wrong? Where can something go wrong? Let me figure out where this can go wrong. And your second flow chart is your food safety flow chart. So you got two flow charts whenever you're designing a grow room. You want to make sure that the architect understands this as well. Because I know a lot of times I've seen grow rooms get built and the architect didn't even have one conversation with me at all. And them companies are not in business. So you want to involve your HVAC person, you want to involve your plumber, you want to involve your light guy with the people that are also helping you on the expertise side. So that way everybody's on the same page, everybody understands what's going on, and so that way we can have safe food for all these people on this planet. Do we have any questions here?
Thanks so much, Nick.